All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on this webinar on how to reverse your legacy. I talk a lot about legacy for women, and that's a word that a lot of times women don't associate with just because it's usually used for men. And, historically, we've talked about how men carry legacy or they're passed on legacy from their fathers or from their family, and they have to carry this legacy on. But then women feel like there is no legacy for them. And so with the past year, I've been really working and focusing on uh, um, I guess the word is empowering women to start thinking about, what are you sharing with the world? What are you passing on? And it doesn't have to be something like a building or wealth. It's just who you are as a person that impacts and changes the trajectory for other women or your children or your family or the people that you're just surrounded with. And so when we started talking about legacy and building legacy, we found that a lot of times we're held back as well, right? It's hard to move forward when you feel like you have an anchor that's holding you back as well. And so, for that reason, I thought today would be a great session for us to talk about, what is that legacy that's been bestowed upon you that's giving you the behaviors and the background and the things that's really not moving, letting you move forward. And for that reason, I brought on two amazing human beings here, Yessica Fernandez-Cruz and Dana Codispoti. I'm going to let them introduce themselves just because, they have so much knowledge and so much wisdom to share. And I would not do them justice by making that intro of like what they do and who they are. And I forgot to say my name. My name is Yenvy Truong, and I've been doing these webinars just to really support women, to give them the type of information or to give you the type of information that you would not normally not find everywhere, right? And sometimes there's so much information you don't know what to listen to. And so my goal is to really bring in women that are experts, professional, that's been living and transforming different lives and their lives through various situations and obstacles and milestones in life. And so watch my other YouTube channel videos, on health, wealth, relationships. And then today, in order for us to move forward into those spaces, we'll want to reverse our legacy as well. And so I'll go ahead and have Jessica. Oh, before we get started, let me read a disclaimer. The content shared in this webinar is for informational and inspirational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or psychological advice. Please consult with a licensed provider for any personal health or mental health concerns. And then I'm going to be talking about our nonprofit called HIGHER Inc., which is a 501c3 nonprofit that provides free coaching for women in crisis, but does not offer clinical therapy or emergency services. So, Jessica, why don't we go ahead and have you kick it off?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Yenvy. Thank you so much. I guess I also want to say you are such a powerhouse and such an inspiration to all of us. A lot of the things that I do today have had your influence, your little seeds in it as well. So if I talk a little bit about what I do, I have to start at a point where you and I work together. And I think that our friendship and our relationship has evolved into this depth as well because we started at an executive level in biotech and longevity industry. We were good friends at a, I want to say, more superficial level, not because we were superficial friends, but our depth didn't get there. We didn't know.
Mhm.
And we've sort of evolved together in time, getting into this deeper understanding of life and allowing ourselves to reverse our legacy.
Right.
And so, in my case, I come from that world, and I have to say it's a great world. I have nothing against it, but it wasn't me. That was my father.
Mhm.
My father is an outstanding physician professional, has a foundation for prevention of chronic diseases, and I've been in that my whole life. But then at some point, I gave myself the permission to listen to myself and understand that in that whole world, what I really enjoyed was listening to people helping people connect with nature, with themselves, to reconnect, to find that element of who we truly are. And
Mhm.
so when that started to show up in my life and I started to understand that, I gave myself permission to become a coach and a mindfulness instructor. I've been very lucky to have the best teachers I could think of, and I today really have, I'm very focused on doing this, on helping people connect and reconnect with themselves. So thank you for the opportunity and for letting me part of your amazing projects as well.
Wonderful, thank you. And something I want to add about Yessica is that if you ever want to feel love, work with Yessica. She gives so much love when she coaches, and you can just feel it. And just being in her presence, you can feel the love that just comes from her. And so that's why I enjoy being around you, not just because we connect so well, we're on the same wavelength, but it's just you always feel that love when we're in the same room, when we chat, when we talk. All right.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you.
Yessica. Dana.
Yes, and I could back that up too. Even though Jessica and I haven't had the chance to meet in person yet, I feel like I know her just because that love resonates and through, and it's just you can definitely feel your energy from afar.
Oh,
So I
thank you.
agree. And Yenvy, it's been such a pleasure to work with you the past couple of years as well. Yenvy and I met actually through the organization Chief, and I'm in the corporate world still, but have also really gone way deep in my own life for various reasons, and have developed now a coaching practice helping women in crisis and a related nonprofit called Higher that Yenvy mentioned earlier. But Yenvy and I, by sharing my own personal story, which we can get into a little bit later, Yenvy and I saw an opportunity to work together, and thus this friendship and this relationship has developed into a much deeper connection than just being in a group cohort that we were in, which creates, magic, that comes out of it. So by day, I'm a chief people officer in HR. I think just my HR skill sets have also allowed me to hone some of my deeper relationships and get deeper with myself about, life in general. And so now just wanting to share that more with the world. And I have the awesome opportunity to work with these beautiful partners in doing so. So thank you for this opportunity today to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dana. And Dana, and this is where when you're authentic to yourself and you share your story, you connect with people. And Dana and I met during COVID on just a virtual meeting, and it was part of the program was we meet once a month, and that was it. And we during that first meeting, we shared our stories of, our upbringings and what made us who we are today, right? And as soon as she gave her story, I was just so touched, just because it was raw, it was authentic, it was real, right? And so when we allow ourselves to be authentic like that, it connects with people because that's what we're looking for. That's what we're craving is for the authentic relationships, authentic connection with people, especially in a world of digital and world virtual and AI and whatnot. We don't know what's real anymore. And so when we know that people are going through pain and we can identify with that because no one has gone through this life without any type of pain, right? And so through pain, we can connect and really make something beautiful out of it, right? And so with today's webinar, it's really a panel discussion, and I have a list of questions for us to discuss. And we talk about legacy, as I mentioned early on, but then reverse legacy. And a lot of times you've probably never heard this word, and I didn't hear this word until a couple months ago when I sat with a woman that said, granted, I want to keep growing, but I can't grow because I had to work on reversing what I've learned, reversed on what was expected of me, right? Reverse of the history and the belief systems that I built over time as a child and growing up and being abused and then, being going through all the trauma that I went through as well, I had to recognize that and work on going through that and not be in a position where that held me back, but I had to clear that out so that I can move forward, right? And that was so powerful for me, just because it's true. Even when we try to move forward, we keep going back to the same place sometimes, and it's because we haven't, I don't want to say the word dealt, but we haven't, emotionally and transitioned past that, right? And we haven't worked and practiced through those feelings. And it's not something that, that you're like, okay, it's step A, B, and C. It's recognizing that, and then what do you do after? And so that's really the crux of the conversation today, is the awareness of the bestowed legacy, how to reverse it, and then how do we move forward for a new legacy, right? And having two amazing coaches here, that have personal, experience in it for themselves, because we all have some type of legacy that we're really held and expected to carry through, whether it's good or bad, almost, right? And so we put that expectations on ourselves. And so the first question I have here is, what do you define as a legacy? What is the definition of a legacy to you? I would love to open it up to either you, Jessica, or Dana, whoever wants to speak first on it. But what's your definition of legacy?
I mean, I'm happy to start. I think, when I think of legacy, I know you said it earlier, often people think it's something like big, right? Or concrete or something like that. But I've thought about this a lot, and I think when I think of my own legacy, there's a piece of it, certainly from Higher and the coaching that I'm doing with executive women. It's being able to take your own experiences and then give back to others, learning from those experiences and then being able to help others through their own crises and things like that. So that's one piece of legacy. But even bigger than that, we all think about, like, my legacy of my kids or this and that. And I actually think it's what I call these micro moments in your life where, I'll get a phone call. For example, it happened very recently where someone called and said, hey, I'm going through this, or, I had this experience. And I remember you said once 10 years ago, and it's something like I won't even remember that I said, but they remembered. And so to me, it's sort of those micro moments or interactions that you have with people where it lands on them in such a profound way that you don't even know you're doing, because you're just being yourself or being authentic or being truly in the moment for them,
Mm-hmm.
that for them, it could have changed their trajectory of their life. So you may not even be able to say, like, my legacy is this, right? But to me, it's about those moments. And I think another way to frame that is, recently, my dear aunt, she passed away. And I had a moment where, I had written my own, memories of her. But what was so interesting to me was that every single person we spoke to or who spoke about her described her in the same way. And I was like, that is legacy,
Yes.
right? To be able to be that, for people in such a consistent way,
Mm.
to me, that sort of like wrapped it up in a bow. So it's a few different things for me on different levels. But like, again, even in that example, it is about those micro interactions she had with everyone in her life that people were able to frame and describe in a certain particular way. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's kind of how I think about it.
I love that. Definitely consistency in who you are, right?
Yeah,
Um, authentic, authentic.
yeah. And it's that simple, right? It's
Yes.
not a project.
No.
It's just a way of being.
Mhm. Thank you. Yes. Yeah.
Well, I have to say this week has been interesting because I was listening to Jaime Mujica. I don't know if you know him. He was the president of Uruguay for a while, a very special man, very humble man, and was a president. Nothing Americans can understand at this point today, but he was very humble, right? And he always had a great way of talking about philosophy, about humans, about our relationships. Very well-hearted, well-spoken. He had a very special way of reaching out to people. And the one thing he said, and that stuck with me, and I thought that is it. um, because they were asking him, how would you like to be remembered? What is your legacy to the world? Then he said, wait, it's not about me being remembered. And I think this goes back to Yenvy's point of how we have the concept of legacy where, we have this big name, our family name there, and then somebody, our child, is going to take that over, right? That's our legacy for them. He says it's the seed that you leave in the world when you leave that makes the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it can have any shape and form. It's simply that seed that leaves the world a little better. And I thought, that's it. That really is it. And then he said, and then you live your life with a purpose that every day you pay attention to, am I leaving a seed?
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. And so he said, I was lucky to become president, so I had a big job to leave a seed. But I also had it on a daily basis when I saw people, interacted with other people or had a chance to help a child or whatnot. So I think that really resonated with me, and I thought, since I've heard it, I think of it every day now, right? And thinking of what's the seed today? Is there a seed? Maybe not, and it's okay. Maybe tomorrow, but you connect with it in a way where the legacy has to do with where can I? And here comes what you guys were just saying. Can I leave a seed? I'm not going to be the one that's going to teach CEOs or company business people to do business stuff because that's not me. But I can go from another place and leave another kind of seed, right? And I feel that that's really the journey that we create is understanding where is my seed? What is my seed like? And that legacy sometimes that we get from our parents doesn't let us see that real legacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys think?
It's 100% true, right? And just us doing this webinar and sharing information, that's a seed itself. That it's gonna wake somebody's mind up. It's gonna create some type of awareness of individuals, of women, of men who were like, wow, I never thought of it that way. Like, how do I be more purposeful and think about what am I leaving? What seed am I sprinkling every day? And I think it's not just a seed, right? It's just sprinkling of seeds, right? And so when and it's in everything we do every single day. It's like rays of sunshine that just shines over, right? And so like that's the way I think about it. It's your essence that you just leave, like a perfume that just kind of stays in the room when you leave, right? And so that's how I think of legacy. And you're more purposeful with that energy, I would say. When we're aware of it, it's just like every time we leave a room, we leave some type of energy or of awareness for another person, whether it's good or bad. And so, how do we be more purposeful of leaving something that's good, that's going to grow into something? We don't know what it's going to grow. It could be a seed of like an oak tree or a mango tree or something, but we don't know what it's going to grow into, right? And so the goal is to leave something that's that's going to grow and support and feed others, right? To use an analogy. And so that's beautiful. I hope that was helpful for everyone listening on, that our ideas of legacy at least, and not necessarily the what's been defined in previous. And, part of this of redefining legacy really is redefining our definition for a lot of words that's been put on us, right? And people, a lot of times when I use certain words, I have my own definition for it, and people are like, "Well, I don't think that's what it means." I was like, "Of course, that's what it means. That's what it means to me." And I was like, I go, there are so many words in the dictionary that doesn't exist anymore, and then there's all these new words that are coming in to the dictionary, right? Why can't we just redefine? We can do that for ourselves so it serves us. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing what you need to serve you, as long as you know what your seeds are, right? And so the next question I have is, what do you believe to be components of a legacy? And I think that we kind of touched on that. If there's anything like, like what are the things? You said the seed, I said authenticity, being real, leaving something that's going to nourish the people that you leave, this idea back or this energy? Is there any other components that you can think of in regards to what makes up a powerful legacy or legacy worth leaving?
I think it's the connections you make with people. I think it's those, you know, it's connection and interactions. But you said it, authenticity, but it's truly authentic interactions. I think that leave the legacy and the imprint, right? That kind of stays forever. Whether I think it's all a little bit of different words for the same kind of thing. It's like that seed. Like even in my corporate role, I said to myself, the minute I started this role, I said, if I can go home every day and say to myself, I've impacted one person in a positive way today, then I feel great about what I'm doing. Right. It's like that, and I think, sometimes it takes you to be a certain place in your career, in your life, to be able to frame things this way. Because, when we're young, we're like ambitious, we want to do this and that and the other. Um, but I think now, as we have these conversations and just the experiences we have in life, we think about things differently and we think about the meaning behind why we're doing certain things. And we're able to sort of like throw away some of the things we might have stressed about, that really don't matter.
Yeah.
I think it's just getting to the essence of, what have I done today that really helped somebody? It could have been one person, could have been one hello on the street. It could have been, something you said, a way you smiled. Exactly. You know, I've had people say like, wow, I'm so happy you smile the way you do. And it's like, oh, my smile could change your day. Like,
Yeah.
that's easy. That's super easy. So I think it's all of those things.
Yeah. Wonderful. Yes, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I would add to that, there's also a part that I don't know if we're going to go too deep into something, but I'm just going to mention it. Courage would be a word because there is a part of you that knows a little bit about the legacy you want to leave or what you want to do, but do you have the courage to actually do that? This smiling part, which sounds so simple, but do you do that or are you embarrassed to do it? Do you think, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid if I smile too much or am I too this happy person in the room? And so I would say, because it applies to that, which is maybe a simple example, but also to the deeper ones, do I have the courage to go out there and speak my truth and become the seed? In my case, when I talk about the seed, or is the seed a little big for me? Am I really, do I have the courage to do that? And I would say there we go into these questions of what's limiting you, right, from having the courage to do it.
And that's so powerful because you may have all those seeds in your pocket, but you don't have the courage to sprinkle them out, right? And so just being aware of that you have that power to do so. And a lot of people hold themselves back from ever sharing that just because they don't think enough of themselves, maybe. And that could, go into my next question is what is a reverse legacy? Like, what's your definition of reverse legacy? Right? Because a lot of times we don't think that we're a CEO level, or that we're not powerful, we're not strong. Why would our words matter? That we're not friendly, we're not, whatever the limiting belief that we have about ourselves, that holds us back from being able to share into the world like all the beauty that we do have, right? Like all of us have that beauty in us. It's just shielded, it's just held back because of this reverse legacy idea that we want to dig into right now. So
Yeah, I
what,
mean,
yeah, go ahead.
I think there's this concept of, like cycle breaking, right? Like we all have been programmed in some type of way, not in a bad way, just is, right? Whether it's your upbringing, your environment, the things you hear on a day-to-day basis. And I think when you get to a point and you can recognize and be aware of why you're doing those things, that's when reverse legacy can begin. You know what I mean? And I know personally for me, the moment for me was becoming a parent because, before you have kids, you're like, I'm never going to be this kind of parent. I'm going to be this kind of parent. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, right? And as soon as you have kids, what I never realized that I found to be so profound is like you naturally parent the way you were parented. Like it's just instinct. It's
Mm,
instinct. And I know for me, the way I was raised was a certain way. I come from an immigrant family, amazing upbringing, lots of judgment, lots of, really, perfectionist mentality, you've got to be this and all of that. And it served me in so many ways and made me really, the person I am today. I'm very successful, but in other ways, certain pieces of your upbringing won't serve you. And I think for me, learning that my natural parenting style may not be the actual way I want to be. And that's work. It's work to be able to sort of like work with the patterns that you've grown up with and learned and adjust for how you want to be. And it's not always successful. Even in your mind, you're like, I'm this kind of parent, but then on a day-to-day basis, all that other stuff is coming out. So to me, we can't really talk about reverse legacy unless we are aware that this sort of programming and everything exists. And then you make a decision like, do I want to change at all? Or am I comfortable in that? And then we have choice. We either do the work or we kind of don't. And maybe some people don't need to do the work because it's serving them, right? But I think it's that first awareness, then an evaluation of, is this serving me, or not? And usually most of these attributes that we have, or have been ingrained in us do both. Most of them serve us and don't serve us at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really like, a lot of the work I did from my coaching courses and stuff like that really teaches you how to break those apart. Mm-hmm. And once you can do that, you can what you're working with, and then you make some decisions on what you want to reverse, what you want to keep, and like who you really want to be to leave the legacy that you personally want to leave, not the one that was passed down to you. And that takes it takes work, but it also takes willingness and wanting to really kind of face those things.
Mm-hmm. Wow, Dana, congratulations on the work. A lot of work.
A lot of work.
It is, but worth right? it. It's worth it. And one thing I was just teaching the other day, this session with the group in Higher, and we were talking about inner voice. And one of the things that comes with your inner voice is that self-criticism, right? And so we don't realize it, but we live in that self-criticism every single day. Every day something happens and you talk to yourself in a certain way. And there's an exercise that we do to understand this reverse legacy actually that we're talking about, where we do like a visualization and you find yourself in a difficult moment where you made a mistake and you ask yourself, well, how do you talk to yourself in that moment? What were the words? What were you telling yourself? And I'm not going to go through all the details of the visualization. It's not the point now, but there's a question at the end that says, who is behind that? Who's the person that you can see? Can you see what they look like? Is it a man or a woman? Who is saying that? And then you start to realize, well, this was my father, or this was my mother, normally, or some teacher at school, someone who represented an education for me, someone who was important for me growing up. Mm-hmm. And then I find that when we do understand that, there's a lot of those supposed to. I am supposed to be a certain way. I'm supposed to behave a certain way. And these are little seeds that they put into us. And I want to say that there's one thing, give grace to whoever it was, if it was your parent or it was your teacher or whoever that was for you. They're probably fear-based teachings, right? People who were afraid that something would go wrong for you. And what they learned in life is that if you're doing it this way, your life will be good. And so please, you're supposed to be this kind of person. Mm-hmm. Which doesn't mean that we're not going to get into that you can have a dysfunctional situation with a narcissistic parent and so on. But just in a simple, normal family where parents are not perfect and it just happens that way, to understand that you don't have to, if you don't want to, stay loyal to those supposed to. Mm. It's okay not to. Mm. It's okay for you to choose Oh, I like this supposed to actually. It's really good for me. I keep it. But this one, I cannot be who I really am because it actually was, and I'll give you my own example. My mother has a little bit of an low in emotional intelligence, and so she can break into these emotional moments where it's very difficult to deal with her and so on. And she would get very anxious if I was like too excited, right? So I always had to be very quiet around my mother. Now I inside, and I have now a partner who always says that you're an artist. I love to jump around, to laugh, to make people laugh, to be silly.
Mhm.
I didn't never allow myself to do that at home because I was always asked to be quiet.
Mhm.
And so that stuck with me and it made me very shy
Mhm.
until I gave myself the opportunity not to. And that's how I today work at a radio station and I talk to thousands of people every day. So I think those supposed tos are also things to listen to and understand, okay, do I want to reverse that? And what do I reverse it into?
Mhm.
And I don't know what you girls think, but I feel that you know what it is because it's a part of you that is asking to be expressed and you've not allowed it
Mhm.
in some way.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
totally. I even
I
think about
100% agree.
my own, background with my family, right? I was expected to be a physician, like many um individuals in my culture. Yeah, to be a
Yeah,
physician. And the scariest day was me telling my parents, while I
yeah.
was in college, I'm not going to be a physician. And they were so upset. But I go, but I'm going to be a biomedical engineer. The only reason I chose biomedical engineers so I could stay in healthcare and so that I could deviate from being a doctor, but still stay in healthcare and find a softer path to let them know that I just didn't want to be a doctor. So I feel like I got a harder path getting that degree, but it was, it was not right for me. And when you going back to courage, right? That is the most powerful, I think, if there's anything we take away today, it's the word courage, because all of this takes courage. All of this to one is for you to tell yourself, wait, this doesn't serve me. I'm gonna have to change this, right? That courage to take that next step, the courage to change, the courage to, disappoint, not only, to disappoint the people that have those expectations of you, or to feel guilty that you're not living up to expectations. And it's not even your expectations, it's of other people's expectation. It takes courage to walk that path, to rediscover yourself now that you've decided that this legacy of theirs doesn't serve you. Right. And so that's the powerful work that has to be done. Um, so that's where I think, just from my experience, but throughout the experience that I grew up in, which was fairly traumatic, but I had to do a lot of work. But the one thing that stuck with me, there was one seed that my dad said to me as a child was, if somebody else can do it, you can too. Why would somebody else, like, why would they be able to do it and you can't do it? And I was like, and that one, I remember I was 12 years old. We were standing outside in the shed, right? And I forgot what it was. I think it was like he wanted me to, this is okay, I'll throw the story out because it's gross, but at the same time, he wanted me to open up this trash can that had like larvae all running around, maggots. And, I didn't want to be a doctor because I just don't like gross stuff. And I was like, but I don't want to, I can't. And he goes, anybody, you can do whatever. And that was him manipulating me to do it. But that stuck with me still because, it was somebody that I looked up to, right? And we talk about, like, whose love did you crave as a child? Because that's the path that you normally take, is the person that the love that you crave, you normally start gravitating towards them because you're trying to earn their love by doing the things that they expect of you. Right. And so that really, just that awareness as well, now that I'm older, I understand, like, oh, that was my father. Oh, that was expected of my father. Oh, that was expected of my mother. Right. And it's not just that, that was expected of the university I went to. That was expected of the teachers that I exposed. That was expected of a boyfriend or a friend. Right. And so those were all expectations of others that we've really took on as our own, as a legacy. And then now we're like, okay, this all of this stuff doesn't serve me. It was their seeds that they were spreading, right? So how do we, become aware of that? Like, what do you have steps on thinking about how we should start to even become aware of like what those legacies are? Like, do we sit with ourselves? Do we meditate? Or is there anything that could be practical that we can do even?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jessica is going to probably have a lot more to say on this topic from a mindfulness perspective, but I think your body tells you when things are not right. So uh, I always say we all have this superpower walking around with that half of us don't use enough of, and that's our gut, our instincts, right? And we have this inner voice that will scream pretty loudly if you listen, like, this is not working. And I think physically your body sort of reacts to, something feels icky, something feels uncomfortable, something feels whatever. And I think if you start to examine those feelings, like those physical and inner voice feelings, and acknowledge that they're there, then you start to ask the questions. What are you trying to say to me? What are you trying to tell me? What is not serving me? And you go deeper, right? But most of us, will just ignore the signs or ignore the voice, or we think, we're being paranoid, or we brush things away. So I think it is going internally, whether that's through meditation or whatever. But sometimes it's literally like, I teach my kids from little. I'm like, you have this thing called your gut, and it's like, it's a superpower. And I'm like, it's always going to tell you when you're in a situation that's uncomfortable. And so I think we all need to remember that we have these tools that we had from day one. We've squashed them down, we've ignored them, because we were in the supposed to, right? We're supposed to do this and that and the other. But I think it starts right there. Like if you're like about to go somewhere and you're like, actually, instead of just keep walking, like take a minute and be like, wait, what's up here?
Hmm.
So, and then of course, Jessica, I'll hand it to you, but like there's way more strategies to go deeper, real deeper. But like it just starts there with those little moments of like, what's happening? Why do I feel this way?
I want to emphasize a powerful phrase that you just said, and I think this is extremely powerful, is that your gut is your superpower, right? That is, I
Yeah,
think a lot of us
yeah,
don't
I believe
listen to
that.
that, our intuition, our gut feeling, and we ignore it. And that is our superpower.
Yeah. Yeah.
Superman always being Clark Kent instead of being Superman.
Yeah. And frankly, women have a stronger one.
Yes, Wonder Woman.
Yeah, there you go. But I, in my all my coaching, that that's one of my main things is to pay attention to that one thing. Because, frankly, if I had paid attention to that, the course of my life would have been drastically different.
Mhm.
However, and there's an end to that, which is thank God it went the direction it did, because I am able to use it to help others, right? But for someone else, that may not work out so well. You know what I mean? But I say that to say, like, most of the time, if you look in the rearview mirror, you're like, I ignored it. I ignored it. I ignored it.
Mhm.
Mhm. I love the gut feeling that tells us exactly what's right or not. But I want to bring something or add something to that, which is I cannot listen to my gut feeling that thing that my intuition is telling me if I don't understand that a lot of people stay in a state where we think that is the normal state because we don't know another one.
Mhm.
We are in fight or flight, we are nervous, we are anxious, or we are overworking, trying to keep ourselves busy all the time, so we're stressed, and that is not a natural state, right? So I would say if we want to learn to listen and we want to become aware, the one thing is we need to clear the field a little bit. If we are the kind of person who's like with a lot of supposed to's in our inner critic, we will be constantly criticizing ourselves, thinking we're doing it wrong, having to go faster, find the right person, find the right job, find the right this, be the perfect mother. This inner world is too noisy for me to even get close to hearing what my legacy is. And sometimes I get people who come to to me and they say, "Oh, I don't know my purpose and I want to find my legacy, but I need my purpose. What's my purpose? What's my purpose?" And you see them with the level of anxiety and nervousness, and you're like, this is not the place where we're going to look for a purpose like that. We will never get there. And so understanding that there's a state where you can be in a neutral way, that you don't need to live in fight or flight, I think is the first step to open up to understanding legacy. Whoever is in that state, then you have people who are ready because they do have the ability, just because they naturally have a good regulation system, and they have it because they grew up in a home that was safe and they felt the right way. They probably are already connected with their legacy. They don't even know it because they're doing it every day, right? So my invitation would be, you can build that awareness, but see if there's something blinding you that doesn't let you really sit still with it to listen.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I
And
would say most of us living in here in New York, our nervous systems are, there's a lot to sift through.
Yeah.
Let me tell you that. So I think that's a great point though too, because I was an example of that too. There's no way I could have heard stuff because I was in a consistent state of fight or flight, and to some degree I still am because of my surroundings. But that's key, is really even just on getting a basic understanding of your nervous.
mm-hmm. Is there a question that you would ask, especially as a coach, if you're trying to understand a person's reverse legacy, right? Like if you wanted to ask that person and get a sense of who this person really is. And I know it's challenging with one question. I'm sure it's a serious question, but maybe there's a question that cracks open the person and cracks open their mind and their heart, and so that they can start to uh, feel more relief or so, or just start thinking about like, oh yeah, that's been holding me back. Is there one question that you would think would be really powerful that someone in the audience or somebody that's listening right now could ask themselves that could really crack open that mind or awareness?
Yes, it you looks like you have, yeah, you want to share? I have a little
Yeah.
different approach to it, but yeah.
If it has to be that one question, I would simply say, where are you stuck?
Mm.
And that unravels the whole story.
Yeah.
I think it's
Where
the
are you
beginning
stuck?
of opening up. Um,
Mm.
but I would say silence though, because when you're in discomfort, when there's silence, so much information comes out there.
Yes. Yes.
And I would add to that. It's not one question, Yenvy, so I'm sorry, but to maybe couple that, there's an exercise that I have people do, which is literally called the Who Am I exercise. And
Mm.
what you do is you take a deep breath and you get quiet in here, right? And you ask yourself, who am I? And you just write down what comes to mind. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a, coworker, I'm a whatever, all the things of who you are. And then you pause, and when you sort of run out of stuff, you do it again, and you keep doing it. And before you know it, you have this mega list of all the things you are,
Mm.
which really sort of changes how you look at yourself, because most of us all day are walking around with one of those personas or identities in the driver's seat. You know, some people walk around as the victim, some people walk around as the, whatever. But the point is, when you start to see, I am all of those things all the time, right? And in some ways and different days and different hours, one of those is leading versus the other. But you start to look at yourself differently, and you start to have grace for the ones that maybe don't feel as good. I'm a perfectionist, or I'm a victim, or I'm a whatever. Maybe then you start to say, I need to explore those a little bit more. And so it's just a different way of looking at it. But I think it starts to um, just sort of like diffuse the I'm this, I am this type A, blah, blah, blah. Like I'm actually all these things. And maybe I'm not all these things to everyone, but within my being and within myself, all these parts of me exist. And something will start to pop to say, I need to go deeper and start to, examine my legacy for who I am in those moments.
With me, the one thing that I always ask, and I like to look forward to understand backwards, right? And when I look forward, I would ask somebody as, where do you want to be in 10 years? Like, what do you like? Tell me a story. And a lot of times people can't even visualize themselves in 10 years because they think that they can't access the life that they think the life, a beautiful life is a dream or only in the movies, right? And that tells you so much limitation in a person when they can't even visualize a beautiful story for themselves, when they can't even tell a beautiful story for themselves, just because that they're so anchored to who they've been or what they've been holding them back for so long, right? And so I like to ask questions because that tells me so much when a person is like, like, I can't even visualize it. I can't even tell that story. I've never even thought of that, right? And so that becomes a powerful exercise because I've done that previous where I've been in like ruts or in a bad place, right? And I sit down and I'll write a letter to myself in 10 years or 6 years or 5 years so I can look back at it, but it's while I'm writing the story of where I am, and in 5, 10 years or so, I'm 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 writing a story of whether I believe it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It's just the story that I want to live in at that time. If I can't even get there, that means that there's so much that's holding me back that I won't even allow myself to put myself in a beautiful story for the future, you know? So that's an exercise, I would say that's practical. If you can do it, but if you can't do that, then that's something that you maybe sit down and really investigate why that is.
We're all living in the confines of what we were programmed to be,
Yes.
right? And, somebody once gave me the analogy of like, as I was sort of evolving in my own work, they said, you're like Alice in Wonderland, in that part of the movie where she starts growing and like bursting out of the house,
Yes.
and it's like that, right? It's like we're all living in a smaller house, and until you sort of allow yourself to like break through that ceiling and build the bigger house,
Mhm.
um, you
Yep.
know, dream of the bigger house and then kind of be able to, furnish it the way you want and build your life in the way you want it, but you gotta be able to sort of like allow yourself to do that and give permission. You really have to give yourself permission to A, look at things differently, B, do the work, and C, get there, Um, so I thought that was a great analogy when they shared it with me. I was like, oh
Mhm.
yeah,
I
I'm
love that.
I
I can
love
see
it
it right
too.
away. Like one arm sticking out the window, the other sticking out the door.
And just to share, I mean, this is just a side story, but it was very bizarre because somebody shared that analogy with me. And then I went to, I don't know if it was a book signing of something or whatever. And someone handed me a notebook, and it was one of those black and white marble notebooks. And on the notebook was a picture of Alice in Wonderland. It was the most bizarre, beautiful moment. And I was like, amazing. So, you know what I mean? Pay attention to those signs too, because that's the universe just saying, like,
Yes.
keep going.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So we have a couple minutes left, about 6 minutes. So something I want to just really focus on for the last part of this conversation is Higher, our nonprofit. Website is liftherhigher.org, right? And I want to share the story, or for all of us to share, because Yessica, Dana, and I are all part of a nonprofit that helps women navigate through crisis moments. Right? And Dana and I are co-founders of this nonprofit. And so I just want Dana to really share her story because I mentioned earlier in the discussion is that I reached out to Dana, even though, we only met a couple times once a month, but because she was authentic and she shared her story, it connected me when I realized that there was, that I recognized that there were so many other women that were going through the same story that she was going through. right? And when I said, well, what do we do about this? How do we solve this problem, help other people and help other women going through this? I reached out to her, and this is where the story begins, right? And so, and then Jessica is one of our master coaches at the round table, that we have a number of master coaches to support women going through to go through their crisis moments, and then we'll describe what a crisis is as part of this.
Yeah, so thanks. Um, you know, about 9 years ago, I had what I call my own personal crisis, which, without going into too many details, found me leaving my home at 3 o'clock in the morning with a 5 month old and a 2 year old, with sort of no direction of what my future life looked like. I had been in what I then realized to be pretty tough relationship, and it wasn't healthy for us, and it was unsafe. And so what I found myself in was a 4 year court battle that had some experiences that just to this day probably I may have blocked out, or shook us to the core. We moved multiple times. We lost all of our belongings at one point. Um, and I had just started a new job 2 weeks prior to this happening. I had 300 people reporting to me, and I had to, show up every single day. But behind me, like, it was like the towers were crumbling. So um, throughout that process, every time I walked into the courtroom, I just kept thinking, like, if this is happening to me, what's happening to all of our other women who may not have, we talked about courage, who may not have the courage to face it head on, who may not have the wherewithal to figure stuff out, who may not have the support system around them. And so, in that moment, I remember thinking, I have to give back. And so I also sit on the board of a beautiful organization called Safe Horizon, which is the largest victims assistance organization. And what I found was, there we provide shelter to people who are in crisis and really need that level of support. I started a coaching practice where I personally support, executive women who are going through personal crisis. There was a gap in the middle. In the middle, meaning, professional women who are navigating personal crisis but can't really afford a coach, right? But everyone deserves that support and that guidance and that sort of hand holding through something they're going through. So that was sort of the genesis of the work that Yenvy and I are doing. And what we say is, a crisis is not the thing you're going through at all. Crisis is the feelings of, I can't move forward. I'm stuck. I don't know how to get, over this mountain that's in front of me. It's feelings of despair. It's feelings of just hopelessness. It's feelings like I just can't move forward. And that can manifest in, relationship issues, phase of life issues, just maybe loss of job, whatever it is. So that's sort of, there's a lot more to the story, but that's sort of the genesis of how we got here. And now, we're serving women who are ready to do the work that we talked about, and maybe just can't afford the level of coaching that we can provide to them. So, Yenvy, thank you for allowing me to share my story. But yeah, we are just, we want to help as many people as we possibly can.
Right, right. And with higher, the way I look at it is, for every woman that you help go through this crisis, because they're almost in a cyclone or vortex that is
Yes.
just a tornado that they can't get out of, right? For every woman that you help, you're helping an entire community, because there's so much that depends on that individual, right? From children to family members to employees, right? To just and when they're in that vortex, they can't think about sprinkling seeds. They can't think about,
No.
how do I leave a legacy? And so what we learned is that a lot of women who are going through this, many times they can't even afford coaching or therapy, or having access really to that support that can help them, look for that right path. How do I slow down and find that path? Or what do I think about this vortex that's circling around me right now? right? And so what we do is with our master coaches, they've either gone through their own crisis, or we've all gone through some level of crisis. A crisis could be, you know, your relationship, grief, a loss of a job, COVID, being stuck in your little apartment by yourself, right, for months at a time. That's a crisis. And so during this period, when you're going through this, how do we help you navigate? And if you don't have the financial support or willing to be able to afford it, we're there for you, right? And so when we're there for you, you're there for everyone else as well. And so that becomes really, really powerful because we're not just helping one person, we're helping an entire community that relies on that person.
And thus creating better legacy. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And Jessica, as one of our master coaches, what's your thought and what's Jessica helps with stress, mindfulness, and being in a crisis is one of the highest stressful moments you can be. And so
Yeah.
having Jessica and being able to give somebody love that they don't feel that love at that moment
Mm,
there.
mm. This is something very beautiful that you bring up, and I find this a lot with people who are in crisis, especially because they're normally in that fight or flight state a lot. I teach compassion. It's one of my areas of expertise. And it's interesting how when you speak about kindness and words like that, they are so foreign for a person who's in fight or flight. So the one thing that I find we really help everybody that comes to us in every single session that we do is understanding that it's not about the content, but about the response. And so if you learn how to respond to any situation, it doesn't have to be the worst crisis in your life, just understanding how to flip from fight or flight to protect and care for yourself, there's a totally different world, no matter what is happening to you. And I think what we try to do, and it is probably the core of this beautiful project, is to work with the emotional state that you're in to begin with, to help you fall into a state that can receive and listen and start to shift this in order for you to have the tools forever to respond to anything that happens to you, because obviously these crises sound very unique many times and we think this is just happening to me, but the feeling of crisis can be very simple for a person and can take them down. So it's understanding that we can respond to life in a very specific way that will give us the tools, the resilience, the strength. I think, Dana, you had that strength for sure. I mean, the way you responded, you said the word courage, that those are things that we need to cultivate in us to be able to respond. And that courage can be for a very simple crisis that is maybe not as heavy as the one you went through. And if you don't have the courage, it feels like the world is coming to an end. So I want to really give both of you my really from my heart. I'm so lucky to be part of this project, and I'm so happy to hear you speak from the heart and care. I think the beauty of this project is in the amount of care that there is. It's taken us a long time to build the program because we were very careful with it. And the more we work on it, I see that this is a group of people, the coaches that are there are amazing as well. Everybody cares. And I hope that the result in here is really that the women feel like they were cared for and that they take the tools as well.
Right. That's right. Okay, so thank you so much for both Dana and Jessica for sharing your story, giving your thought and your expertise on legacy, reverse legacy, and also on crisis moments, right? And so tomorrow we will send out to everyone who subscribed and registered to this webinar. We will send out an email with the YouTube link for this episode. And then we will also share Dana's and Jessica's information so you can get in touch with them if you would like them to coach you or would like to work with them. And then we'll also share our Lift Her Higher website. So if you are going through a crisis moment, please, please, please go ahead and reach out to us. We're here for you. And then if you know of anyone who would like to support our project, please donate because every dollar really does count for nonprofit because we are here and it's not a business. It's really something that we're doing with love. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you so much.